In some cultures, people drink wine for health reasons. Does the Bible permit that for health reasons? Some scripture seems to allow a little wine. 1 Timothy 5:23, Paul says, a little wine. Talking to Timothy, take a little wine for the stomach's sake. 1 Timothy 3:8, talking about deacons not given to much wine. Does it mean a little wine is okay? Let me give you some background. The word wine in the scripture refers generically to the juice from the grape. It's not always specific. Technically, as soon as you crush the grape and get the juice, the process of fermentation begins. It's very slow at first, and of course, you add yeast to it or whatever you do, that speeds it up. But technically, there's a natural process of fermentation that begins as soon as the juice comes. So, in recognition of that, when the Bible uses wine, it can use wine to mean anything from the fresh juice all the way to juice that is fermented. You'll have examples like the word new wine or the wine in the cluster. I think it's Isaiah talks about the wine in the cluster. So still in the grape, it's called wine. So when the Bible uses the word wine, it's not necessarily being specific. In some context, it's obvious people get drunk on it. It's obvious it's fermented. In other contexts, when it gets the wine from the harvest, it's probably not fermented. Also, it's important to understand that in ancient times, they did have methods that would slow down or arrest the process of fermentation so they could keep wine for a long time without it becoming strongly fermented. Another thing is when they would serve the wine, they would usually dilute it with water. So they would not normally just drink the straight juice, but they would have it mixed with water. So even if it was fermented, it was not very strongly fermented, and it would be very difficult, like sitting down eating dinner. You couldn't get drunk because the wine would be diluted with 2 or 3 times the water, and it would be more like a flavored drink than it would be an intoxicating beverage. So keeping all that in mind, in the Old Testament, they did drink fermented wine, and sometimes we see the dangerous results of that. In fact, many times we see that. The book of Proverbs contains some strong warning against drinking alcoholic beverages. It says, don't look at the wine when it moves in the cup. And it's talking about when it's fermented. In the New Testament, we see Jesus turning the water into wine. I feel like he created fresh juice, not fermented juice, because when the juice comes from the grape, it's fresh. When God creates it, he doesn't create it fermented, he creates it fresh. And so that's how I think Jesus did it. Fermentation is actually the process of decay. And so I don't think that the creation would have decayed beverage. But when Paul was giving instructions to Timothy, he says, don't drink water any longer, drink a little wine for your stomach's sake. Evidently, Timothy was having problems with, like lots of missionaries do, he's having a problem drinking the water of the location where he was. And so for health reasons, I don't think Paul was talking about fermentation. He was talking about, be careful of the unsanitary water. Drink juice, don't drink water. So whether it was fermented or not, again, I would say it wouldn't have been very strongly fermented. It would have been a table wine that would have been used for drinking purposes that would be sanitary. So my answer to that is there's nothing in the New Testament that advocates drinking of intoxicating beverages. To the contrary, I quoted earlier Ephesians 5:20, do not drink wine wherein is excess. Be not drunk with wine wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit. So any strongly intoxicating beverage, I think we shouldn't drink it. It would be against the teaching of the New Testament particularly. And I would also say this. The Bible talks about Christian liberty, but it also says don't use your liberty to cause a stumbling block in someone's life, and don't use your liberty for anything that would gain power over you. 1 Corinthians 6:12, all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. Not everything's beneficial. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. I will not allow myself to become under the power of anything. So I think when you apply these principles, we should not drink intoxicating beverages because they have this potential and this danger. And as I gave you some of the statistics earlier, the significant problems in society caused by alcohol are so great that I think the church should abstain as a measure of trying to keep our families and our society free from the problems that are caused by alcohol.